Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's fit and well. Just like to start by saying thanks for all of your support over what has been a very difficult season this year. Football, of course, is very important, but it's not as important as the health and safety and the welfare of everybody. And so it's been a difficult season for everybody. And I'd like to place on my support and my thanks for all of the hard work of our players and our staff who've been doing a fantastic job in keeping us all safe and well. I think we were very lucky that we didn't have as many problems as maybe some clubs had, and that's all down to the plan and the preparation and support of our medical team and everybody else who's worked very, very hard to keep us safe. Having said all that, I think a good summary of the season would be that we are disappointed in the end. We are a very big club in MLS, and for big clubs, enough is never enough. And what we want to try and do is we want to try and achieve as much as we possibly can. And certainly we wanted to get a little bit further in the playoffs than what we did. And so I suppose now the hard work starts in terms of planning and organisation for the new season, which will come around quickly enough. And so that's very much what we're going to be turning our minds to, with deep conversations with the new head coach, Gerhard, and with Dennis, our sporting director, and with other staff to make sure that we are as prepared as we possibly can be now for that new season when it starts, and to give us a very good opportunity to do better. And so with that, I suppose I open up for questions to start to discuss that in a little bit more detail.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll just go in the order that hands were raised. First up was Andrew Visano.
Hey, Kevin. Speaking about moving forward, what advantages do you have now that Gerhard's already, with the club and has started? How does that give you sort of a leg up or move you forward heading into 2021?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. It's a really good question. And so what it allows us to do, by the very fact that we've had him in the building for even for a short period of time, is just to start to review and evaluate, to check and challenge some of the things that he's seen from distance on the video, and then to get some sort of alignment on what we do going forwards. And of course, watching people on video is very, very different to see them up front and close and personal. And so now that Gerhard's had an opportunity to do that, pretty much as soon as the season's finished, we've had a chance to sit down and talk about what a strategic plan looks like for next season and going forwards. I'm delighted to say that we've got very clear alignment on what needs to be done next season. And so we are now in the process of trying to action that plan. And of course, that's the easy bit, is the talking. The difficult bit is actually getting the work done. But that's what we're going to be trying very hard to do over the course of the off season.
Next up, we'll go to Eric Friedlander.
Hi, Kevin. Eric Friedlander, Red Bull Hub. Could you talk about the coaching staff? I know Bradley's contract ended at the end of the year. Will he be back? And who's ultimately deciding how that shapes up? Is that full control to Gerhard, or is that you and him working together?
Yeah, so first and foremost on the coaching staff, so Bradley will be rejoining us. For all of the time that Bradley was interim head coach, and then from the time that Gerhard was appointed, there was deep conversations between those guys at distance. And so they always had a conversation about what things would look like. And I'm delighted to say they've built a very good relationship, and Bradley's going to continue with us going forward, which is great. Unfortunately, Preston Burpo is not going to be moving forwards with us. He's out of contract, and so we wish Preston all the very best and thank him for all of his efforts during his time at New York Red Bull. And then just in terms of what it looks like going forwards, we appointed Gerhard as the head coach because he's got outstanding experience and outstanding expertise, and we expect him to be very, very good in the role. And on that basis, of course, it'll be a flat structure in terms of communication, across lots of different areas. But fundamentally, Gerhard, in terms of the team, will be responsible for performance of the team, preparation of the team, and fundamentally results. And I'm hoping that we can help to produce a team that helps him to get those good results and take us forwards.
Thanks, Eric. Next, we'll go to Anthony Merced.
Hello, Kevin. So you mentioned before about Red Bull being a big club in MLS. We have not necessarily seen the spending of the club reflect that, and it's not necessarily about bringing in big name players, but we haven't necessarily seen the investment, let's say, in some players. Should we expect that spending to drastically go up in the next season?
Yeah, hi Anthony, thanks for the question. Yeah, I don't necessarily know about spend and level of spend and go up or go down. I just think it's about building a better team with better players, and so very much that's going to be the raison d'etre going forwards is to really work hard to improve some of the areas that we think we need to, that we think we're maybe a little bit weak, provide a bit more support to some of those stronger players that are in the group, and then hopefully become a bit more cohesive, a bit more consistent, and have a much stronger identity than what we've had before. So it's very much about working on those lines, really. How that relates to spend, I'm not sure, because there's all sorts of opportunities out there for us to improve the group. But without question, we recognise that we need to have a much stronger roster, and we need to bring in players that are going to help us to get further in the playoffs. And so that very much is going to be the focus of our work during this off-season period.
Thanks, Anthony. We'll move over to Gary Redman.
Kevin, good afternoon. Gary Redman from Red Bull News Network. Good to see you again. A couple of questions right off that runs off the top of my head, and speaking with several supporters. Have you and Gerhard talked about getting specific needs for the teams and identifying specific targets to meet that objective? And second, you've talked about how Red Bull is a big club in, of course, in a very large market. However, as they say, they haven't done that so. But for many supporters, they've seen other teams in Major League Soccer have gotten the players that they need to go further in the playoffs. How can you convince those supporters that going forward, that's going to be the aim and not just, the same old, same old?
Yeah. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate the questions. So I suppose the easy answer to question one is, in terms of specificity, yes. So since we've come out of the playoffs, we've had a really good opportunity to spend some time with Gerhard and talk specifically about what a strategic plan looks like going forwards in terms of team, in terms of roster. Of course, I don't want to go into any more detail on that because we need to now work hard to get some players into the group, and so hopefully you'll see that in due course. In terms of big club, well, again, as I said to the players at the end of the game, there's only one reason that we're all here. There's only one reason that we all get out of bed in the morning, and that's to try and achieve something. And what is on our agenda to achieve, and that's to win MLS Cup. And so, without question, what we have to do is we have to all fall behind that vision and that mission, and try and work as hard as we possibly can to achieve that. How can I reach out to fans and convince them that that's the case? Well, there's only one way of doing it, really, Gary, and that is for us to work away, for us to produce a team that looks like it's capable of winning an MLS Cup, and then to actually do it. And so I suppose the proof of the pudding will be in the eating in due course. But in the meantime, all I can say to you and to those fans is that we are going to be working as hard as we possibly can to identify players and get them into our roster to hopefully be those difference makers when those key times come. I would hope me joining from the Premier League is a statement of intent. I would hope us recruiting Gerhard is a statement of intent. And so going forwards, we're going to be pushing as hard as we possibly can to make this club as successful as it can be.
Thanks, Gary. Next, we'll move over to Cam Albert.
Hey, Kevin. So your first year in MLS is done. Can you talk to me about some things you've taken yourself to adjust doing your job? And then can you talk to me about the players that you brought in? How do you think they fared this season, and how that'll adjust recruiting players in the future?
Yeah, hi Cam, how you doing? It's a great question. A couple of things. Number one, from a personal perspective, moving countries is never easy, and so culturally, things happen differently, and so that's been a steep learning curve for me, is identifying what the club values and then figuring out how I operate in this space. Of course, MLS looks very different, and there's the rules are very complicated, and it's taken me a long time to get into the weeds with those rules and sort of figure out how we then best use those rules to build our roster. And I suppose I'm still getting used to those rules because it feels a lot simpler in the Premier League for sure. And then in terms of players, I can't think of a more tougher time to join, truth be known. It's been very, very, and especially from our perspective, because we're recruiting young players. So for those to join in a normal season at the very best of times is tough and difficult. But for them to join in the middle of a pandemic where they haven't been able to be with their families, they haven't been able to have the support of their mums and dads. Some of our players have lost people, lost family members, which of course makes it very difficult. And then only be able to travel home come the end of this season, having to go through all of that period on their own alone is very, very difficult. I'm pleased to say that I think the players that we've signed have acclimatized to a level. They've certainly built themselves into the group. And so what I would hope next season, fingers crossed, if we can get back to a level of normality, is that we should see them in much better space where they know their environment, they know the characteristics of the league, they know the team, the club, and hopefully what you do is they become more settled and we become and they become better for it.
Thanks, Cam. Always good to hear from a former Red Bulls comms intern. Next up, we'll move over to Juan Mesa.
Hi, Kevin. Juan Mesa from El Diario. Of course, the Caden Clark story was a success one, right? But at the same time, there were other two players in Red Bulls too that had good numbers and good performances, Omar Sowi and Jay Lacava. So my question is if there's plans of promoting them to first team. And the second question that I have is also related to Red Bulls 2 is about if you can talk about the strategy of recruitment for the team for that team from now on. I mean, I know this year it was special because you couldn't use first team reserves or supplemental roster parts in that team, and you rely a lot in the team rely a lot in the academy players. But I'm also wondering if if there's a plan to bring young internationals for that team.
Yeah, hi Juan. Yeah, it's another really good question. So first and foremost, we're delighted with Caden Clark. I think we all recognise that he was performing very, very well at USL. He'd also had the opportunity to train with MLS, so we were comfortable and confident that he was going to be capable. Of course, we had to sort out the situation with Minnesota in terms of homegrown rights, and I'm delighted to say that we managed to do that and give him the opportunity that he's had, and he's taken it, and long may that continue. He's a very balanced young man, and I know he's a very hard worker. And so we hope that if he comes back to us at the start of next season and continues that journey that he started, and then quite rightly you say, Omar Sowi and Jake LaCava also performed very, very well at USL level, and that hasn't gone unnoticed. And both of those, as soon as we were presented with the opportunity, were training regularly on a daily basis with the first team. And so that has provided them with very, very good experience, albeit we haven't been able to get them some MLS minutes. But I think we all understand that the squad and the roster is very deep here. And so my view would be, and again, this will be part of the process for next season, as it has been for a long time here at Red Bull. They will continue to get opportunities at USL, but continue to get opportunities to train with the MLS squad. We want to improve our performance. So win MLS Cup, as I've talked about many, many times. But it's also about pipeline. It's also about producing our own young players and giving local young players, as well as international players, the opportunity, first through USL, and then if they prove themselves to be capable, then through MLS. And so if I'm a young player at New York Red Bulls, I don't think there's ever been a better time for them to be at our football club, because without question, we're trying to create a much stronger alignment between Academy, USL and MLS. And we're looking to do the most important bit, which is to create opportunity for them to train and play at a very high level. And then, of course, if they're good enough, then they're old enough. And that is very much about what we're going to be trying to do going forwards.
Thanks, Juan. We'll move over to Mark Fishkin next.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks so much for doing this for us. Really appreciate it from Seeing Red here. Two quick questions. One, can you speak to the team's feelings about Chris Lima and Ben Mines, two young players that came up through the academy system, Red Bulls 2, and then the first team, and won't be continuing with the organization. And then secondly, in terms of the players that you exercise options on, there were forwards, central defensive midfielders, attacking midfielders, wing backs, center backs, all in the mix. So I'm curious where you see the shortcomings of the team are when you go out into the transfer window that'll be opening soon. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mark. It's absolutely my pleasure to be able to speak to you guys, and I hope in due course we'll be able to do this a little bit more informally and hopefully together at some stage over a coffee, so I can actually get to know you guys a bit better. But in answer to your first question, yeah, Chris Lemmer and Ben Mines, we obviously thought long and hard about. Obviously, quite rightly, you make the point about their development and about their pathway, and it was very much about pathway in the end. So my personal perspective is, yeah, of course, it would have been very easy to re-sign Chris Lemmer and very easy to re-sign Ben Mines. But actually, and so that would protect us and support us to a point. But if we didn't feel that they were going to get the appropriate number of MLS minutes, then what benefit would those young players get? And would that actually aid and support their development? So, of course, my role has to be about making good decisions for New York Red Bull. But some part of that, I have to make good decisions for young players as well. And so from my perspective, it was about saying, okay, well, listen, what we need to be doing is rather than just taking you to protect the wider group, let's call it, it's actually a much better solution for you to be free from contract here. And hopefully that creates an opportunity for you to go and get the appropriate minutes that you need at MLS level in a different environment. And I hope they go on and be successful. Both of those players understood that, and both of those players were grateful for us thinking about them in that way. And I'll be the very first to say, if those guys go on and be successful in MLS, how pleased I would be for it, because we've played a part, and we continue to play a part by the decision that we've made. I'm certain of that. And then to your second question, just about options. Yeah, we have re-signed a number of players on an optional basis, but I still, without going into the detail, and you'll understand why, Mark, we still think there's a lot of areas that we need to improve. In some of those positions, in some of those areas that you've mentioned, they would be starting positions. And in some of those areas you've mentioned, they would be supporting positions, having more strength in depth. And that's going to be the end game, really, is taking the roster forwards and making sure that when we get to our first game, whenever that may be, and we cross our fingers that it's in early March, we are as strong as we possibly can, not only in our starting 11, but also in our supporting group, to give us the very best opportunities to succeed next year.
Thanks, Mark. Guys, we're approaching the 20-minute mark here. I see two more hands up, so we'll go to those two media members, and I think we'll wrap. So I'll start with Tom Bogert, and then we'll wrap up with Steve Cangelosi.
Kevin, thanks for taking the time again. Tom from MLSsoccer.com. So I got two questions that are pretty related to each other. I guess, first of all, I don't know if you're going to be able to speak to this or not, but is it possible in Drew Yearwood's kind of contract to be bought down off of the DP level? And two, the larger part to this is, if there is either one or two DP slots open, what can you tell us kind of about the plans and about, the aspirations the club have with those one or two spots in particular?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And again, my pleasure. And it's I appreciate the question. Yeah, I suppose number one is everything is possible. I don't know if I really want to talk about the detail of what you're requesting, and there's a reason for that. Is because that things ebb and flow, and certainly over the course of this off season, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of ebb and flow in terms of some of the decisions that we make, and then how of course, we've got a very clear strategic plan about how we want the whole roster to fit together. But of course, that can change very, very quickly by the availability of one player or the unavailability of another. I suppose the end game really is, and I suppose this is a summary of an answer to your question, is that we want to build a stronger roster as possible. And if that means we have to move and shake the roster about a little bit in order to do that, then of course we'll be working on that very, very clearly. The vision is get a higher level of performance, achieve more consistency, and then achieve more control. And the only way in which you do that is by bringing in some stronger players, and then also by the direction of the head coach. I'm delighted to say that I think we've got a very strong piece in Gerhard Struber. He's going to be well supported by Bernd and well supported by Bradley, and a new goalkeeping coach that'll be joining us in due course. And then it's all about us working really, really hard to get some synergy with the players that we bring in, and the synergy that's already with the players that are already in the building. And that's the tough part, because we've got a little bit of building to do to make sure that we marry those two things together to make us to give us the very best chance possible for next season.
Thanks, Tom. And to wrap up, we'll move over to Steve Cangelosi.
Kevin, as everybody else said, thank you very much for your availability. You partially answered my question in your last answer when you talked about ebb and flow, but you've spoken about a need for youth. And I'm wondering where 28-year-old Aaron Long fits into the picture here. If you're prepared to speak about that now. You had said at the start when you took over, there was a healthy dialogue with Aaron and his agent about his future. Can you tell me where that stands now? And if I may, I just have one quick follow-up about Bradley Carnell when you're done.
Yeah, perfect. Hi, Steve. Yeah, great to hear from you again. Yeah, so I suppose it's pretty clear about the vision of this football club, and the vision is about achieving performance, i.e. working as hard as we can to win MLS Cup, but doing that in a particular way, which I've said many times, and that relates specifically to football and identity, and it really relates specifically to young players, and I don't think we should be afraid of saying that. It's not a dirty word, that. We want to develop our own young players. We want to give them good opportunities to be able to prove that they're capable and also help us to win things. Now, having said that, of course, there needs to be a balance. And of course, someone like Aaron Long would also be a very important piece to us to helping us to achieve great things going forwards. You know, he's a national team player. He's very well experienced now. He understands our philosophy very, very clearly. And Gerhard is being very, very pleased with him in the time that he's spent with him. And so going forwards, of course, we're going to be centering around younger players, but that's not to say there's not a need for slightly older players that have that experience, that are able to provide those supports and have had have been into those circumstances and those contexts where you're going to need them most. I had very good experience of that at Wolves. We created a very, very young team, but without question, they were very, very ably supported by people like João Moutinho, who's slightly older now. And so without question, I can see the benefit of that. And so can Gerhard. And so Aaron will be very important to us. And of course, if there are other slightly senior players that we can also bring in to help those young players and help performance, then of course we'll do it.
Thank you. And one last thing about Bradley. You've talked about him remaining with the organization. Just for further clarification, is that situation now done and dusted? There are obviously jobs open in MLS. There will certainly be jobs open all throughout the world. If an inquiry comes in, what would Red Bull New York's response be, Kevin?
Yeah, so we were very pleased with Bradley during the interim period. We thought he did very, very well for us. We wanted him to give him the opportunity to talk and speak to Gerhard about the strategy and the vision of this football club's going forward. And I'm delighted to say that Bradley has committed his future to us. And so long may that continue. Of course, in due course, Steve, if there's interest in him, then we'll have a very mature and very transparent conversation with Bradley about it. But for the current time, he's a big part of the coaching staff going forwards, and we're delighted to have him. And we're delighted to see what he can achieve with Gerhard and Bernd as a part of that new coaching setup.